Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. It's Thursday. JP Mason joins me as usual, and Brian Degnan, who's normally on a Wednesday, comes in to make it a 3, makes it a treble. You know, is it going to be a treble winning season? Who knows? We are keeping it alive. Just before we came online, there's plenty to talk about after last night, JP. I was talking to you leading up to this, and you were asking about the Jota disallowed goal. I watched the game like a lot of Celtic fans who weren't at the game. I watched it on the Red TV, so they didn't labour the discussion around Jota's disallowed goal. I watched it again this morning on Celtic TV, so we'll talk all about that as well. JP, you were up there at the game. Tell me, what was your experience last night?
Well, it kind of was inspired by Sunday's events and not getting a ticket for Motherwell away.
Oh, I hadn't heard. You never got a ticket, no?
that certainly blew up a little bit on Monday. I didn't really expect that sort of Twitter debate. My phone was going absolutely bananas. I had to turn my notifications off because it was just folk just jumping on it, calling us entitled, calling us spoiled, and all this sort of stuff. And for anybody that doesn't know, somebody put out Lisbon Lion. I can't remember the name of the Twitter handle, but he put up a post basically saying why did Motherwell not give us more tickets when there was so many empty seats? And I replied and tagged Alan Burrows, the CEO of Motherwell, in it, and he replied to me with quite a lengthy, 3 or 4 thread post. And I totally get what he's saying, and I don't disagree with it. It might not be, to everybody's, sort of choice, because obviously loads of Celtic fans want to go and see the team home and away. But yeah, he basically said he was building something at Motherwell, didn't want to disrupt the home fans. And long and short of it, he said short-term pain for long-term gain was kind of the narrative. And it was a very kind of not friendly. It was a friendly, back and forward. There wasn't anything bad about it, and then it ended up making the news that night. It was like the Sun did an article on it, Record did an article on it, it was on Super Scoreboard.
And you were described, JP, as an angry Celtic fan.
Yeah, and he even alluded to that when I went back to him and said I didn't think you came across as angry at all, which is why I replied. He said other people took it in other directions. The whole debate took it in other directions, and he went, "Well, that's Twitter for you, isn't it?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, it kind of is." So, but one person did reply and said, "Don't know why you didn't just get a Motherwell home end ticket." There was a few of us did it, and we just sat and kept ourselves to ourselves, and nobody said anything. And I went, "That's an idea." So that's what I did last night. Sat in the stand with a mask on and a Man United scarf, and didn't cheer the Celtic goals, sort of faux cheered the Aberdeen goals, stood up, gave it a kind of clap, and then sat back down, and then just went, "Oh no, please don't let our title hopes evaporate in the stadium while I'm in the home end."
JP, whilst people are jumping on you, someone has got that footage. They're going to release it to say you're not really a Celtic fan now. You understand that, eh?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it. But it was just good to be at the game because I just want to see the game. I don't want to watch it on a pay-per-view TV, and I tied it in with going for dinner with my uncle beforehand, so it was a win-win for me, and very much a win-win because we got the 3 points. So yeah.
Alan Burrows falls out with angry Celtic fan at the weekend, and then he fell out with Tony Watt last night. You've obviously rattled him, JP.
Oh, did he?
He did. No, in person at the game. Yeah, at the game. And both of them have come out and said it was handbags and they love each other, etc. Brian, what's your take on this? Because, it's an ongoing issue in Scottish football in that, some teams have relented at St Johnstone, for example, and then they've gone back and they've not given Celtic as much access, Celtic fans rather, as much access as they had done. If you are approaching this from a business perspective, every single club, I would guess, should sell as many tickets as they possibly can for every game against Celtic and every game against Rangers. Now, is that just me looking at it through green-tinted spectacles? Surely it's a good business decision to ensure that, I think St Johnstone had to ask something like 103 fans to move to allow Celtic an entire stand. So you think about the money for the tickets that St Johnstone sell to allow Celtic another stand, plus the average revenue per fan once they're in the stadium on pies and fruit shoots. And then, obviously, you make a lot of money. And you do it times 4 every season, twice against Celtic, twice a week. I mean, 103 fans, surely you can repay them in another way. Seriously, am I looking at this through a Celtic prism, Brian?
I don't think you put it like that, it makes sense. I think Burrows in his conversations with angry fans like JP, I think he actually put it across quite well. I think he made a decent point. I think there's still ways around it. There's no reason why they could have rearranged some of their season ticket holders into certain sections and open it up bigger for the away fans, especially when it is Celtic or Rangers, because they're going to get filled and it's going to make money. And is it going to make a huge difference to the atmosphere? I mean, is it really that much of a debilitating factor for these teams to have more away fans in? I don't think so. But again, it is always hard, right? Because for us, we would say, want more fans in there, want more our fans in.
Mm-hmm.
But I suppose with Burrows, what he did do was communicate his reasoning behind it. So whether you agree or not, you can at least see his point of view and you go, right, well, okay, I can sort of see your point. Might not agree, but I get it. It's when the other teams sort of don't really have any sort of logical reason for it. And that just seems kind of petty, a wee bit silly to me. So I think it depends. But see, with Burrows, I actually think he came across fairly well, actually. Motherwell have done quite a lot recently that have been impressed. And I think he was another one. And it's nice that he actually comes out and engages. So I think on that issue, I'd say at least he'd had good reason. But on the wider footballing issue, yeah, right. I mean, from a sort of financial point of view, it makes sense to have the most fans in as possible, right?
You would think so. But again, we criticise Scottish football and Scottish football teams. And again, last night, we can't even watch it on Sky Sports. We can't watch it on any broadcast other than the PPV service that Aberdeen put on. You subscribe to Celtic TV, Premier, Sky Sports, what's the other one, BT. You've got the season ticket pass, you've got a season ticket, but you can't watch the game. That's frustrating as well, JP. I mean, I obviously wasn't up at Pittodrie last night. I was in here and I covered the game with you and Martin, who might or may not be. Yeah, there he is. He's actually in the comments section. So last night he's on the show and this morning, there he is. Hail, hail, troops. And so, you do feel as a Celtic supporter, though, a wee bit hard done by JP in that respect, and that you're buying all these packages just to watch Celtic games and go to Celtic games. And then last night was yet another occasion where the only way of watching that game, other than a dodgy stream somewhere, is to pay $12.99 and watch it with 2 Aberdeen commentators.
Yeah, I mean, I paid, £27 for a ticket, and I got the train up, and then very kindly got a lift back by pal Robbie. Cheers, Robbie. So got back in the, I don't know, about 12:30, 1 o'clock last night. So, but all of that for me, although I was sitting in the home end and it was a weird experience, I've only done it a few times before in my life. St Mirren, Falkirk, Brockville, and Anderlecht in the Champions League. Now, that was a tough one because I had to sit in my hands when we went 3-0 up in the Champions League. It was a really hard one to do. But I just like going to the football matches. I've sat in my flat for the last year and a bit or whatever, or the whole of last season, sitting watching games in my flat on my own, unable to go and see anybody. Is it any surprise that my desire is even higher at this moment in time to go and watch football matches in person? And then the allocations that are given to our support are so small and the demand is so high, because I'm not unique. Everybody's the same. Other people have been chomping at the bit to go to the games whilst we've not been able to because of this pandemic. So it's that's what's going to happen. You're going to, maybe not going to get it en masse, but nobody can come and shout at me for behaving myself in the Aberdeen end and watching my team win. And it was as much as it was not great in terms of I couldn't celebrate, I just had a mask on so no one could see my big wry smile, which was brilliant. So I just sitting there absolutely loving life. Meanwhile, people around about me going absolutely mental, calling us septic and everything else.
Oh, dearie me. I've done it once, and it was at Easter Road. in the 1980s, so probably not the best time to actually do it.
That's an insane choice, Paul. An insane.
From a young, foolish boy at that time. Brian, you've done it as well, done it at Old Trafford, didn't you?
Yeah, I done it Celtic Man United Champions League game. I was assured on the bus on the way down there was a ticket for me, and then I got there and the news was broken to me that there wasn't. The only ticket available was a home end, and I was in the full hoops with a daft Fighting Irish scarf right in the middle of a sea of red, just myself. It was horrific. And I was steaming, right, so I just got off the bus. So first I was boisterous enough. I was kind of clapping and saying hello to people and that and being a bit of a wido. And then about 10 minutes in, we scored first. I think it was excellent. And the atmosphere, you seen the head starting to turn. And I'm not going to lie, I bottled it. Absolutely bottled it. I mean, oh no. There was 2 Irish guys next to me, Man U fans, that I tried to befriend. Picked off and I got battered. But that was a tense night.
Were you wearing one of the jester hats that Enrico Annoni wore after we stopped at 10? Were you wearing one of them? Did you make it that obvious, Brian?
I think I had some form of hat when but definitely I remember the jacket right. Full hoops on, and we were right under the away stand. The Celtic fans were up the top.
Yeah.
They were just going for it, and then they were shouting back and forth, and I was in the middle going, "Oh, lad, he's a break." But I enjoyed the game, but the good experience. But I started getting nervous around about half time. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to bother going to the toilet or going for a pie yet. I'll hang fire, make sure I'm safe, and then that route when possible.
Deary me, you put your life in your own hands. Martin O'Neill is in. That Martin O'Neill? Who knows? Full throttle football and blowing teams away is great, but to expect it every week is a fanciful notion. Winning these narrow and tight games is another thing potential champions need to be able to do. Absolutely. And when I was watching the game, even though JP we were up 2-0 at half time, I didn't get that same sense that I did, for example, against Rangers 3-0, against Hibs 2-0, where you're really in cruise control. I didn't get that. I didn't think it was as free-flowing in the first half. Did you get that impression yourself up at Pittodrie?
No, I didn't. But at the same time, you're thinking, well, we've not played really that great and not at the same levels as against Rangers and Motherwell, but we're still 2 to the good. And you're like, well, you can't really argue with that. But the Aberdeen fans around me were absolutely livid at their team's lack of fight and, just the general play in the first half. I mean, they weren't, although we weren't at it, they were so far off it. It was unbelievable. They weren't getting near us. And that was us in, a pretty low gear. So the half time, something obviously happened at half time between the team and the Aberdeen dressing room, and they obviously came out, and maybe Bruni's had words, or Brunner as he's called up there. They call him Brunner.
Brunner. Does any of them call him Browner?
No, they had a flag at the other side of the ground. So the different corner from the beach end, they had a flag. Oh, I mean, he's only been there 6 months, and they've already got like a legend style flag with his face and Brunner written on it. So they got, considering a load of them did they want him when they signed him, and now he's the hero of the place, But no, they came out in the second half and took the game to us. They were physical, and as you kind of sort of expect them to be. I mean, Rangers didn't have an easy game up there a few weeks ago. Only came away with a point. Could quite easily have been the same with us last night, but I'm still curious about this third goal that was ruled offside. It kind of looked like it stopped because it was right in front of me, but I don't know if he was offside or not. So, tell.
I'm glad you brought it up on the WhatsApp this morning when we were having a wee chinwag, because it prompted me to get in about the Celtic TV coverage. And obviously, Tom Boyd is as balanced as they come on the Celtic TV commentary team. But I did watch it several times just to try. It definitely was on because he curves his run. He does the old Larsson thing. I'm not comparing the players before anybody says I'm trying to compare Jota to Larsson. But you know how he used to do that horseshoe run where he runs towards the ball and then around the play? He does that. And he's onside when the ball's played. There's no doubt about it. And then there was a suggestion of either handball or a push, and there was absolutely no chance that Jota either handballed or pushed the player. And, I think what took the sting out of it is the whistle blew before he kicks the ball. So the whistle blows, then he finishes it. But there was absolutely nothing wrong with that goal. And since you brought it up, and I was going to get it to it anyway. What was your thoughts on the disallowed goal, Brian? As I say, I've watched it time and time again with the balanced musings of Tom Boyd, and for me, it was a perfectly good goal.
Yeah, I think it was a perfectly good goal as well. I don't see the huge issue around it. I think it was Ramsey was up against, wasn't it? I think he went down quite easily. And made it look worse than it is. But yeah, I mean, it should have stayed. And I suppose it balanced itself out with the controversy over the third goal with Abada potentially interfering with play. So, I think the result would have been the same. I think it's the 3 goals. It's just depending on what one you want to sort of dissect more. But certainly I don't think it was offside, and I don't think it was a foul in the build-up either.
Yeah, you'll get a chance to see it, no doubt, JP. But I'm with Brian on this. I don't think there was anything wrong with Jota's goal.
No, well, I mean, like I said, I'm kind of like taking the Postecoglou stance on it because I was behind the goal and I didn't spot the offside line as he made the run. But for the third goal, you've got Willie Miller and Pat Bonner both disagreeing over the third goal, saying one saying that it wasn't offside and there was no interference, and the other saying that it was. And then there doesn't seem to be a scathing, widespread condemnation of that goal as being like completely offside, and therefore it should have finished 2-2 or anything like that. There seems to be, I don't know, whenever Celtic are in these tight margins, the benefit of doubt is very rarely given to Celtic, is it? It's always kind of, oh well, yeah, they got lucky with that one, or whatever. And it's just like, I've watched it a few times on various different Twitter posts, and I can't see what's wrong with it. I mean, maybe green-titted specs, like you said earlier, but I can't see what's wrong with it. They put their hands up immediately for offside as the ball goes through to Jota, and Jota's not offside. So that's what they're claiming for. They're not claiming about Abada. They're putting their hands up for Jota, and I thought it was a great finish as well, to be fair.
It was. I was going to mention the finish. Willie Miller obviously refereed about 500 games when he played for Aberdeen, so I'm going to take Willie Miller's take on this, because he disagreed with Pat Bonner and he said there was nothing wrong with it. Abada wasn't interfering with play. And yeah, the way that Jota finished it though, and I'll throw this one over to yourself, Brian, he just basically, he doesn't panic. He plays it into the ground so that it bounces over the keeper. It was a brilliant finish. He might not get the credit for it, but it begs the question. I mean, he scored a double on the strapline there, the importance of Jota. This man is so important. I know that in the early parts of this season, the early dispatches, it was all about Kyogo, and rightly so. Kyogo was sensational. But at this moment in time where you kind of need that hero, Jota's the man. And, not just the creative side of it, but these important goals. That's the second time he's done that at Pittodrie for us.
Yeah, the guy's a magician. He just pops up in the right place. I think he's. I think the first goal was almost even better for me. I think O'Reilly's delivery in the box was incredible, and for Jota to chase that down in such a narrow margin to get it in was exceptional. But you're right about your point about the amount of players we've got that feel like superstars and talisman just now. At the start, it was Kyogo was the headlines. But now you're talking about Jota, you're talking about Hatate, O'Reilly, Abada, you're talking about Carter Vickers being strong at the back, you're talking about how good Dralston's been, how good Juranovic is, the improvement in Rogic, Piton. So, and that's what good teams are about. And I know we're going to talk about it, but I think some of the reaction last night was insane, because people were going, Hatate's rotten tonight. And so, well, do you know what? Sometimes when you've got teams, good teams, some of the players don't shine all the time. But the fact is, if Hatate is having a bad game, you've got a Jota. If they're having a bad game, you've got an Abada, an O'Reilly. And that's the brilliant thing about this squad now that we didn't have at the start of the season. But yeah, I mean, Jota's just incredible in his goal. The controversial third was, according to Brunner, it was controversial. But the technique was excellent. His turn, hit it in, composure, just absolutely wonderful. I think he's a real... when you get players like when Van Dijk was at Celtic, when Wanyama was there, etc., and you think these guys, he's been here for long. I feel like there's maybe 2 or 3 in their team now that I feel that about. And I think he's a real cut above what we've seen for the last few years.
That's an interesting point you brought up there, because quite a few years ago, before we had the the technology to go live and show people what we actually look like, and we were just a wee audio podcast. We had a conversation, Kevin, Colin Watt and myself had a conversation all around, the team we could have had. If you're mentioning about specific players there who were quite clearly shining superstars of teams, and you could probably go right back to when we won the first of the 9, and you could look through that group of players over that period of time, because 9 years, JP, you think, they're all contemporary. Some of them will be a wee bit older by the end of it. But if you were to have changed your model and not relied on bringing a player in, selling them within 3 years for a profit, the team you would have had was astonishing. So you're talking, Fraser Forster in goals, Tierney at left back, Van Dijk in the middle. You could argue about who partners him. Is it Boyata? Is it Denayer? But you could go right through the team, Wanyama and Dembele and Edouard and Paddy Roberts, and the players that we've had within that period. Sinclair probably would get a game. Were incredible. And then you ask the question, what could that team do in Europe? And it's a frustration in mine, because I know that the only reason we have the individual players for that period of time is because they're on a promise that they're going to move on elsewhere. So I totally understand that. I'm playing fantasy football. But on the back of your point, Brian, if we were to keep this group of players together, because they're not hitting their peak quite yet, you look at Hatate, there's a lot more to come. And then you're able to supplement that with another couple of transfer windows, JP, and you're getting the quality in that Ange obviously is seeking to bring into the club, then you're looking at a situation where it's the real deal. I mean, at this moment in time, I'm getting carried away. We're sitting top of the league. However, there's so much more to come from Ange. Another couple of transfer windows. And he brings in some more players like O'Reilly, who I'd never heard of when we signed. Did I know any of the Japanese players before we had signed them? No, going to be honest. And I'm pretty sure a lot of Celtic fans were the same. Had to go out there, do our research, find out where they played, never mind how good they were. But if he's got that kind of ability to spot a star, we bring in another couple in the next transfer window and another 2 or 3. Then you're looking at a side that I think it's evolving right now, but people are saying he's building something special, JP, and I think he is. Last night, you're going to get that in Scottish football, right? The old adage, it was, can you do it at Brockville on a wet Tuesday night? You're going to get games where you just got to grind the result out. And we'll talk about the character and the mentality around that. But can you see a point where we need to put the stoppers on this model, this recruitment model, and say, you know what, we're going to hold on to these players a wee bit longer this time round so that we can build something special? Because I'm loathed to think of Hatate in the English Premiership. I don't want to see Kyogo leaving the club in 2 or 3. It'd be great to keep them together and actually build something that might be able to make an impact outside of domestic football.
Well, as long as we can keep the manager, because I think the manager's key to all of those guys being here in the first place and obviously ultimately staying. With regards to O'Reilly, somebody made a point on Twitter this morning that guy, Riley McGree, hasn't even kicked a ball for Middlesbrough yet. And you think of the contribution that Matt O'Reilly, I think he might have had COVID within the last week or something like that, but other than that, he's not contributed to Middlesbrough yet. Whereas you think of the contribution that Matt O'Reilly's made in the month of January and of late, the guy does look really, really good, and feels like we have. There's been a lot of stuff said online about it, but it feels like we've absolutely robbed MK Dons of a player there. And sometimes that happens to us, and it's nice to do it the other way around. With regards to the Japanese players, I hadn't heard of any of them with any real kind of detail, but I did hear, and I think I might have mentioned this before, the guy Liam on Celtic Down Under podcast, he mentioned Hatate a long time ago, like probably last summer, when they had a conversation on that podcast about potential players that he could bring in from Japan. And he definitely mentioned Maeda, and he definitely mentioned Hatate. And I think maybe we already had Furuhashi almost in the door or whatnot. But, so I'd heard of them through him. But other than that, obviously he's plucked a few gems. And the conditions last night were freezing. It was absolutely Baltic in that stadium last night. And I didn't have the luxury of being packed in the Celtic away end, where
No, you never want to see no matter who we're playing, you never want to see a Celtic side on the end of a 7-1 drubbing. I'm going to bring in some of the comments here before I come back to you, Brian. Jungle Lion, long time viewer of the show, welcome back. You're watching on YouTube. You can't play great every game. Over a season, you'll play like champions 5 or 6 times, play poor 2 or 3 times, and the rest you just grind out results like last night. Absolutely, yeah. Chancellor, welcome to the show as well. Sorry, afternoon. You did think it was morning, but you know, the mornings disappear. And yes, we have Steve McGonigal. What a game. This is not good for the nerves. It was some game, let's be honest. I mean, 5 goals, disputed penalties, disputed disallowed goals, etc. A tremendous game for anyone watching as a neutral. Obviously, us 3 were not in the neutral camp. But you mentioned Ange Postecoglou. The other day, and last night, I mentioned the fact, you might have heard, that I got a phone call from a good pal of mine, ex-football coach from 30 years ago, Mick Hutton from High Valleyfield. If you're listening, big shout out to Mick. And interestingly enough, Mick kind of like fed my obsession with George Connolly, because he's big pals with George. And he used to give everybody a football on a Wednesday night at training and say, right, do keep uppies. And he told us a story about George doing keep uppies at Celtic Park in the European night against Dynamo Kiev. You know, this young 16-year-old laddie for High Valleyfield going right around the stadium doing keep uppies. It's part of folklore at Celtic. But that was Mick's pal. They grew up together in Valleyfield, and he used to get us to do the keep uppies. And he started off my obsession with George Connolly, which led to me writing the Quality Street gang. Anyway, I hadn't heard from him for years. And he phones me up, and he said, and it just came in my mind there when you were talking, JP, he said, we must keep Ange. So I'm going to come to yourself, Brian. Ange Postecoglou, obviously, he's been in the door 8 months. You look at the transformation. There were a few with an Acsom team who had been battered by last season, and they were saying, you know, as long as we can keep in the title race, I don't expect us to win the league. I did. I want us to win the league every season. I'm greedy that way. We're in a situation where we're sitting top of the league. We're going up to Pittodrie on a Wednesday night, a freezing cold Wednesday night, for a must-win game, and we win it. Ange Postecoglou, Michael Nicholson's been given quite a lot of credit for signing players. Surely there's a priority working around in the background here that we get him on a secure long-term deal, because it's only a matter of time, Brian, before the vultures start circling Celtic Park for Ange.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it depends how you need to understand this well. Maybe Ange doesn't want the secure long-term deal. Maybe the rolling contract suits him just as much as it suits Celtic. And if we're honest, if we get Ange in a 5-year deal, does it guarantee he's going to stay for 5 years? All it guarantees is that we'll get a payout if someone takes him, really, a la kind of Brendan Rodgers. So I'm kind of less concerned about the contracts for managers, particularly because I feel like the way Ange speaks, I don't think there's any sort of lies in him. I think he's very honest and very upfront, and he seems very clear that he's determined to leave a legacy at Celtic. it seems when he speaks like he won't be satisfied unless he's left some sort of mark in this club when he leaves, when he eventually goes. And that's not going to happen in just one season. So I've no real worries about him leaving anytime soon. Interestingly, though, when you were chatting earlier about the retention of players, so there's two factors I think with that. What I think would be interesting is, if you talked about Celtic changing their transfer mode, what I think would be good is if we did win the league this year, right? We get an influx of money. See if they use that money to readdress the wage structure and maybe retain some of these players on bigger wages to stop them getting attracted to go elsewhere, as opposed to, and the offset in that would be, you know, spending money in transfers because you've got such a key squad. That might be something they could visit. I know they're kind of want to do that, but if you look at the ages, you know, Abada's 20, O'Reilly 21, Hatati's just turned 24, Jota 22, Carter Vickers 23. These are guys with massive potential and sell-on value. If you could retain them for a couple of years, the money you would make would offset the increase in wages you've started. So I think that should be something they could consider. I just don't necessarily think that applies to the manager as such.
Well, interestingly, I'm just looking at an email that came through here from one of our friends in Australia, and he was talking around this. It's been focused on recently, you know, the relationship between Ferenc Puskás and Ange Postecoglou. It goes back to their time at South Melbourne, where Ferenc Puskás was obviously the manager and Postecoglou was a player. And at this moment in time, I won't say who this person is. It might become clearer later on. But in Australia, I've got this message just this morning. South Melbourne and its role is fundamental to understanding Ange. In particular, his deep understanding of football clubs as community institutions that give meaning, joy and comfort to people. South Melbourne was set up to help Greek immigrants in Australia, just like Celtic FC was set up to help Irish immigrants in the East End of Glasgow. He gets it. So this is straight from a fan over in Australia, JP. So, you know, the suggestion that absolutely get him on a long-term deal, I get a different vibe from Ange. I don't think he would, you know, until the job is done, until the project and the race is run, I don't think Ange would look elsewhere, regardless who was maybe sniffing about from the English Premiership. What's your take? Is that me just being an old football romantic, JP?
Well, it's obviously, you know, we've been bitten on that particular front by, so we sound the klaxon, Brendan Rodgers. You know, I mean, I was all in. My chips were all in on Brendan Rodgers. Never in a month of Sundays would I have expected him to disappear like a thief in the night and be paraded in a Leicester City suit, you know, within 24 hours. I mean, I don't think maybe a lot of people will sort of use the benefit of hindsight and say, well, yeah, I knew that was coming, or it was only a matter of time, or whatever. But not to leave in February ahead of a game away at Tynecastle with a semi-final on the following weekend. I would never have thought that would have happened. With Ange Postecoglou, my belief is that he wouldn't, you know, even dare do that. I don't think he would want to do anything that would tarnish his reputation with the support. I really don't. I unless I'm being completely stupid and naive, and I bet you there's one person I know right now that's watching and going, "Oh, you are," and you know, I maybe I am, but I just don't think he would do that. I really don't. I think he's cut from a different cloth. I've listened to him enough. God Almighty, I've heard every press conference he's done. I've heard every post-match he's done. And, you know, you like to think you can sort of glean a bit of what someone's about from those interviews and from him being, you know, brutally honest about his love of football, his plans for this football club, and also the times that he's made mention of people making a mark at clubs as they pass through. We want to make a mark at these clubs, and he's seen firsthand in only 6 months what you know, being at a football club and making a mark at the football club can do at somewhere like Celtic. Bertie Auld passed away. He saw the reaction to that. It's not pleasant that it's taken someone passing away to do that. Wim Jansen as well. So he's seen a former player and, you know, huge champion of Celtic beyond his playing days, and he's seen a former manager, and he saw the reaction. So he knows that he can be held in that sort of category, and he's got an open road in front of him to be able to do a blank canvas, whatever you want to call it, to do whatever the hell he wants to do. And he'll be thinking, the sky's the limit here. I've got money to spend for the first time in my life as a manager, because by all accounts, he's never really had a budget as a manager before. He's got the potential of nights like last Wednesday, in Europe, as well as what we did to them last Wednesday. I mean, that is again, it's maybe me just sitting there going, oh, I'm a Celtic fan or whatever. But as someone who is just a manager in a job, there's not many managers get opportunities to have things like that in front of them to basically play about with and have fun with. And he had fun last Wednesday, and he admitted it himself. He said, I got a bit embarrassed at the fact that I was the last one out in the park. But I mean, I think all of us would have been exactly the same, Think about how great that must have felt after being so badly written off. All of these, online Twitter memes, and you look at the replies to the original Sky Sports news post that announced his unveiling as manager. Have a look at that and get some popcorn, because believe me, it'll make good reading given what he's done in the 6 months that he's been here, because he's made a lot of people look really, really stupid. In fact, I can't believe half of those tweets haven't been deleted, because, they're embarrassing, frankly.
Yeah. Now, Paddy Lavery comes in to say Ange won't leave until he wins something in Europe. Now, I think there is a chance that is in Ange's mind, because, when he comes in at the beginning of this season and he looks at the task in hand, and he's barely got a team. He's got one right back, and it's Tony Ralston, who at that point everybody had written off. He's forced to play Dane Murray in a Champions League qualifier, a must-win Champions League. He makes his second appearance, his first start in a must-win Champions League qualifier. He knew what he was up against, but I still believe, going by the way that he spoke in every interview that he gave and conducted, and everything that he said since, that within him, he would have believed he could turn it around. And, when you think about European success, I've always said that our ambition season on season should be to be in Europe after Christmas. So we've done that, albeit some people don't regard the third tier of European football to be anything to write home about. Right, okay, so on the 25th of May, if we're in the final, you won't be wanting a ticket then. And I think that there will be ambitions that he won't come out and talk about. But it wouldn't surprise me if he does have these ambitions. Some people might think they're lofty at Celtic. Some people might think that it's impossible to achieve that at Celtic. Robert Hyland comes in and says he wants to test himself in the Champions League. He can best serve this wish at Celtic. No EPL top four clubs are going to come in for him. And it's true. I mean, you go down there and you go to a club that's, rich, cash rich, and the kind of money that's kicking around a lot of the clubs in the lower reaches of the English Premiership. You've got no chance. You've got no chance of getting into the European places. You might be able to play with all the transfer fees and buy players for £25 million as if it's just, £250,000. But if you've got ambition to do something in Europe, there's a select few teams, Brian, that you can go to in England, unless you're going to, revolutionise a club, which doesn't happen that often in English football.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things to take note of here as well. So the first one was in terms of Ange moving. Bear in mind as well, he's 57. He's just moved over from Japan. How likely is he to want to start to move again and rebuild again? Now, I'm not being ageist. He might manage to 70, but I don't think he's going to be he's not some sort of young pup that's using Celtic as a stepping stone. This is the biggest, management job he's ever had. So, and he's doing it at a time in his life where his family's settled, he's very experienced, and by all accounts very happy. So, I think there's that factor as well as in movement. When we talk about Brendan Rodgers, obviously he was a lot younger, and I was like you, JP. I was really surprised he actually went when he did, but I did expect him to go at some point because he's age. I thought he's going to have ambitions of managing, winning the Premier League. In terms of the attitude about Europe, I think Ange has been quite open. He joined that he wants us to be the absolute best we can be, If he's playing in Europe, he will be thinking, I want to win this. I don't think he would ever go into a competition, Europe or otherwise, and say, oh, let's try and ride out a draw. Let's see if we can maybe get to the last 16. I think he's going, let's do our best to try and win it. Let's get to a point where we're evolving and we're constantly improving to where that's a realistic option. And if ever gets to that stage, let's win it. If we win it, let's win the next year. I think he's got that mentality where he just wants us to improve and not have limits. He keeps talking about how we're, and I agree with him, he's very much at the start of the journey. He keeps saying there's so much improvement in the squad, and he keeps getting asked, and he's also getting fed up getting asked, but keep asking about progression. How close are we to the finished article? And he says, well, we're nowhere near it, because as soon as we get to that point, we need to improve and be better. There's no finished article. We just keep going, and until we've achieved everything I want us to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think he's sitting in his hands. I think, and look, I was one of the people that thought winning the league this year might have been too much, given the rebuild. And I'm delighted that it's looking like we actually, we're probably favourites to win it now with the performances and the fact we're top of the league. And I'm stunned, because I thought, the rebuild was so big. I thought it's going to take 2 or 3, 4 maybe transfer windows to really get right. But and I think even by Ange's standards, he's further ahead than he thought. Given, I think he spoke about it well, as well, about how in general it takes a couple of years to win something.
Mm-hmm.
Or to build it he wants, whereas he's tried to condense it into 6 months because he saw that as a challenge he had to do. So, there's so much to look forward to, and I think he'll be looking at the Conference League and thinking, I want us to win this. I don't think he's thinking, can we get semis this year? He's thinking, let's win this. Let's win 4 trophies this year. In my first year, and in my second year, let's win another 4. I think he's got that mentality, and I think it's infectious. And I think the players are buying into that as well.
Well, Brian, I find it interesting that at the beginning, obviously because we don't delete our content, JP, as much as there's some bad takes from all of us at some point, it's all out there. And if you rewind 8 months ago to when Ange Postecoglou was appointed, and you compare that to the amount of comments that are actually talking about European football and what Brian's just suggested there, it's an incredible turnaround, because for me, you think the European football, for me growing up, was virtually non-existent. It was virtually non-existent. So, and I've said this a million times, people will come up with a klaxon for this one, but between 1964 and 1976, in those 12 seasons, Celtic reached at least the quarter-final of European competition on 9 occasions. That's a European superpower. We won 1, we got to a final once. There was 2 semi-finals, etc. But the last time we progressed to that kind of heady height was 1980, when we played Real Madrid. And we beat them 2-0 at home. They beat us 3-0 away from home in the Bernabeu. And from that point to Martin O'Neill's time, we never progressed beyond Christmas. So my upbringing was Celtic as a domestic football club trying to win the league. It was never a European thing. You played Germinal Ekeren, or you played Neuchâtel Xamax. It lasted 1 or 2 rounds at the very best. Sometimes you drew a Borussia Dortmund or a Sporting Lisbon, and it was a sexier fixture, JP. But as a European force, it didn't exist. And I remember growing up thinking we will never get to the point of being a European side ever again. And then O'Neill comes along and he completely changes the mindset. He completely changed the mindset, and he never came out. You'll remember his introductory words to the Celtic fans on the steps at Celtic Park. He never came out and said, I'm going to win this and I'm going to win that. He was very humble, and he always put Rangers as the benchmark, didn't he? Because it was a 21-point swing, I think, back then. And obviously, Ange has come in. He's not been banging on about European football. In my Celtic sporting life, I believed under Martin O'Neill we could do something in Europe. I didn't believe under Gordon Strachan, and he proved me wrong, because he got us into the last 16 twice. And I believed under Brendan Rodgers that we could do something in Europe, and I got that wrong as well, because we didn't really make a dent. Under Ange, though, I don't know. Like you said before, you can get changed into a meme pretty quickly if you make lofty suggestions. But I think in the back of his mind, JP, he looks at the European heritage of this club, the star above the crest, and he, in his own mind, will have ambitions in Europe as well.
I mean, I think you only need to look at what we did in such a short space of time. Where he was, 2-3 months into the job, and we're going toe to toe with Betis in Spain, and then latterly going toe to toe with Leverkusen in Germany. That's not with this team right now that's fit and firing. There's no Hatate, there's no O'Reilly. There's no, we're months down the line with the Starfelt Cameron Carter-Vickers partnership. Greg Taylor's back, and I don't know if Greg Taylor was playing at that point or if he was injured. Juranovic isn't the player that he is. And by the way, Brendan Rodgers better get his hands off Josip Juranovic. Like that can't happen. I really, really hope that's just nonsense talk. But when you see Fabrizio Romano's name in and around it, you start to get a little bit concerned. Because again, he's one of those players that you want to see play for, a couple of years at least, to, give him the opportunity to play in a more developed Ange Postecoglou side. But, it's not lofty to suggest that, next season in Europe we could do, better than we did this season. And better than we did this season is if we're in the Champions League, great, we could maybe make a fist of it in that. And if we drop down into Europa League, go a bit further in the Europa League and qualify and make progress on something we've not done for a while. I really don't think that's crazy to think. And when I think back to the Villarreal winning side, there was a lot of stuff at that time about how little they'd spent on that team. You're sitting there going, we are Celtic. How the hell are we not able to do something like that? When we've got the sort of the minerals to, scout wisely, get a good manager in who knows how to arrange a football team. Why are we not able to do that? I'm not suggesting that we should be winning the Europa League every season, but when you see a club like that go and beat Man United and beat a Man United team that was like hundreds of millions of pounds, and obviously that happens every week now in the English Premier League. I mean, Burnley taking points off and stuff like that. But there's not exactly a feat if a European side does it. But it puts up it flashes up a huge question mark in the sky to go, we could do this. This is not beyond the realms of possibility that we could actually, have a decent run in Europe and, who knows, depending on draws and whatnot, get, to the latter stages of a competition, because we've seen how good this team can play. And they absolutely dismantled the champions last Wednesday. And that this is supposed to be this side that's been hailed as this great side of, one of the best sides in the last, 20 years, because they went unbeaten in a league season and everything else, and about 2 defeats in 61 games or whatever it is. We absolutely battered them, humiliated them. So, you take that into the next level, which is Europe. And, I wish we had, a European game against somebody, of note soon. I mean, Bodo Glimt, we beat Bodo Glimt. Nobody's going to give us that much credit for it, because they'll just be like, oh, well, they're a European minnow. Do you know what I mean? But if we go out and hammer them, then maybe people might think differently. But it's just a shame that we're in this lower tiered European competition. But I guess none of us expected us to be anywhere near European competition at the start of this season. We were just all going, right, the league's the most important thing. If we can still be in with a shout at the league come January, February, then, we're on to some sort of positive strides, and we're top of the league and top of the world. Carpenters, as was sang last night. There's an original 1973 copy of the song that was filling the stands in Pittodrie last night, which I was quietly humming to myself.
Underneath the face mask.
tapping the foot.
And of course, the Decca label that's on the front of that became the Oasis label that became the Acsom label. So it's nice to recycle. I'm going to talk about that jersey over your shoulder, by the way. One of my favourites, if not my favourite away top that Celtic's ever had. But you're talking about how can we not do that? How can we not use our finances better? And you look at Hatate, Maeda, Ediguchi, O'Reilly coming in at roughly the same price combined as a Jota. And then you think, well, maybe we are on the road to, it's quite clear we're on the road to doing it completely differently. But going back to a point, just going back to your experience last night, JP, I remember watching, so dig it out if you get a chance, the Anfield Wrap interviewed someone who was employed by Liverpool to get bums on seats, right? So basically, I was listening in my back garden to the Anfield Wrap, and it was the episode that I thought to myself, I think I could do a Celtic podcast. And it was an interview with, I can't forget his name, but he was a specialist and he had worked all over the world in different sporting arenas, not just football. And he was tasked with getting bums on seats at Anfield. And the interview he gave was completely mind-blowing when you think about the way that Scottish football teams and businesses go about their day-to-day running of their clubs. Because he said, at no point should there be an empty seat at Anfield. And that's the first point that he enters the argument at. At no point should there be an empty seat. And I think that if you market it properly, and we've heard it, was it Barry Hearn has said it also, if you market something properly, 10 years ago, what was the darts? 20 years ago, what was the darts, JP? Sweaty guys drinking pints and chucking arrows at a dartboard. Look at it now. Things can be marketed completely differently. And I think we're still at that stage with Scottish football where it's sweaty, overweight guys with pints chucking arrows at a dartboard. That's where we are now with Scottish football. And it needs to be completely revisited and remarketed, particularly when you look at how easy it would be to have a streaming service online. You know, for the worldwide fan bases to tap into. So we're talking about some of these players that have come in as well, Brian, and we're 51 minutes in, and we haven't even really spoken about the game that much last night. But one of the discussions prior to the game was where do we go in terms of the centre forward? Is it Yakimakis? Is it Maeda? Maeda got the nod. Did you agree with that, first and foremost, before we talk about his performance, Brian?
No, I would have probably played Yakimakis, to be honest. I think he looks like a confidence player, and I think he's played well the past few games. Up against like Big Declan Gallagher, I thought that'd been a good contest for the start. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Like, I thought Maeda was poor last night, I've got to be honest. There's a lot of endeavour, a lot of work ethic, but touches were really heavy at times, and you know, he missed that chance for the header. He just looked a wee bit off it, which is to be expected because he's still finding his feet. Mm-hmm. But with that in mind, you know, if it was Kyogo coming back to fitness, I'd have started Kyogo. But if he's in a degree of form and the team's getting used to playing with him up front, as opposed to Maeda making those runs, I didn't see why he changed it. But again, maybe Yakimakis needed the rest, maybe tactically the way to go. But for me personally, I probably wouldn't have changed it. But again, hindsight's brilliant because if Maeda scores a hat-trick last night, then you're not talking about Yakimakis. So yeah, I understand the rotation thing, and there's obviously reasons for it. What I was surprised at is that, you know, Hatate looked quite off it, and I thought he might have took him off a bit earlier. Mm-hmm. And I don't think he was a wee bit tight. There was a wee bit of kind of lack of energy in the midfield last night. And I'm not being negative because I thought the result was excellent. I thought the character we showed and mentality was brilliant. I mean, at the start of the season, people were saying, "Oh, Postecoglou's no plan B. Postecoglou can't see out games. Postecoglou can't manage a game. Celtic can't win ugly." And we done all of them last night, and we have done it several times. So there's a lot to admire in that, especially when, if you're not playing well, you're winning games. But that said, there was things you could see. There was a kind of lack of energy from the midfield, and that was probably more an area of concern than up front. Although, as I said earlier, I thought Maeda was quite poor last night.
I was watching it with interest because obviously it's going to be one or the other until Kyogo comes back to full fitness. There had been suggestions, JP, that both Jota and Maeda can play through the middle, but then the quality of your right and left is dipping dramatically if you bring in Mikey Johnson. And I'm going to say James Forrest, not because I don't rate James Forrest, but he hasn't quite hit full fitness and full sharpness yet. So Maeda gets the call. He starts the game. Yakimakis is on the bench. If I'm being kind, I would say that Maeda chased down every single ball. His work rate is top class. And then sometimes the secondary benefit of that is that it's opening pockets of space for other people to get into. The likes of O'Reilly can go in and destroy teams with his guile and his passing ability. There was a chance at 12 minutes where it was a great move. It was a fantastic move by Ralston and Maeda, actually. The cross comes in, and he should have done better with the header. And I think that moment could have been the deciding factor for his entire night. Like Brian says, it could have just, cracked on from there. He got his goal at the weekend, but he was a bit fortuitous with that, the wee dink off the player's knee or ankle or whatever it was. But over the piece, he comes off at 75 and Yakimakis comes on and does what Yakimakis does. Are we, at the moment, looking at both those centre-forwards and thinking, well, you've got Maeda, who apparently was top of the shopping list when Ange came in, talking about players to bring in from Japanese football. He was ahead of Kyogo. He doesn't look like he's in the same kind of level as Kyogo, but I'm not writing him off because we've not seen enough of him. But he's working hard, as does Yakimakis. But at the moment, we don't seem to have that figurehead. I don't think we do have a striker that is, we're relying on Jota scoring a couple of goals in the midfielder and O'Reilly last night. I don't think we've got the figurehead once Kyogo drops out so far. What's your observations been with Maeda from what you've seen, JP?
Yeah, like you say, he is, industrious and he runs about, chases things down, as, does Kyogo. Kyogo puts so much pressure on a keeper. It's no real, hurries them into making mistakes. And I think Maeda is the same. I think he's obviously a completely different type of player to Yakimakis. Yakimakis on Sunday against Murano, I thought was great and was the cause of at least 2 of the goals. His movement and pulling defenders away gave the space for the goal scorers on Sunday. And by the way, see on that, remember after the Dundee United game, we got absolutely slated for having a pop at Yakimakis, or not having a pop at him, but basically saying he didn't play that well.
Mate, that was just in the WhatsApp group, never mind Twitter.
Well, yeah, the 2 guys I've told me last night go week in, week out, massive Celtic fans, and brought it up, and they were like, yeah, if we'd have gone on air after that game and spoken about Yakimakis, he wouldn't have got glowing praise from us either, because he wasn't very good. Mm-hmm. On the other side of that, you could obviously say if he'd scored that goal and Siegrist hadn't made that save, then he would have been the hero, and Maeda wouldn't have been. But all in, his play that day wasn't that great. I think, again, it's one of those ones where it's a Wednesday night at Pittodrie, it's freezing cold. It's not a pleasant atmosphere really to play football, I wouldn't have thought. And Aberdeen in the second half were a more committed outfit. I don't think, I'm not going to say Maeda should then get dropped for the next game. Who knows what's going to happen in Sunday's game against Wraith Rovers. He probably will play a strong side. Maybe he played a strong side against Alloa away, so why would he play a really, really weak inside at home against Wraith Rovers? He'll see it as an opportunity to entertain, because that's what he loves doing, and he'll want to put the best team in the park to do that. So I couldn't tell you what the team will be, but I can't imagine it'll be far away from something resembling what has been the last few weeks. Whether that's Maeda or Yakimakis, it's kind of good to have a different option up front, Just we've not got all. Well, at one point, earlier on this season, all we had was Kyogo, and we were looking about going, who else can, if he gets injured, which he has done, we had nobody else to come in. And I think there's so much attacking prowess in the front sort of 4 or 5 that, even if your striker isn't scoring a goal, Jota scores 2 last night, and O'Reilly gets one, gets off the mark as well. I think O'Reilly's probably going to chip in with a lot more goals between now and the end of the season, because he's got it in his locker. I know last night was a deflection, but I still think that he's got enough about him that he'll contribute a lot more in the goal scoring stakes between now and the end of the season.
The interesting thing is, by the way, your 2 mates who you shared the car with speak a lot of sense. Agree with me there. Not. And when you look at the goal that O'Reilly scored, he gets the ball because Maeda's harrying the defender and he's having to win a header, and he's putting him under pressure. That's the kind of work that doesn't really get noticed that much, And I think that after the Rangers game, I remember coming away from that not thinking Yakimakis had played particularly well, but you go on social media and everybody's raving about Yakimakis that night. And I remember Chris Sutton was going on about him as well. So the following day, you sit down, you watch the game. When you remove the emotion, although I was still buzzing the next day, you remove the emotional element of being in the moment, and you watch it and you analyse the performance a wee bit differently. What we've got in Yakimakis, I think what we thought we were signing was someone who scored a lot of goals. And I don't think we do have a player that scores a lot of goals in Yakimakis. I think he had a fairly prolific season last year in a very good league last year for a very poor side. So he comes to Celtic and you think he's going to replicate that because we create so many chances. I mean, if you're playing for a club that gets relegated and you still manage to score 20 plus goals, you think, well, you must be scoring a lot of your chances. Your conversion rate must be high because you're not going to be, making a lot of chances against the likes of Ajax, etc. It comes to Celtic, we historically create a lot of chances. There's a lot of balls goes into the box. And I think that there was this feeling that Yakimakis would score a lot of goals. I mean, Scott McDonald comes in from Motherwell, scores 32 goals for Celtic. Because he's a good goal scorer. However, the biggest reason for that is because of the chances that are getting laid on a plate for a striker wearing the green and white hoops domestically. So Yakimakis hasn't been that player that I think I certainly expected him to be. And I'm now looking at other areas of the game that are strong. And he, is strong. That's his biggest area, is the physicality. There might come a point, though, and I think it might become frustrating when, it can't always come down to Siegrist having a great game or Kelly having a great game or McGregor having a great game, because you do need to get some kind of goal return from your centre forward. You can't have a non-goal scoring centre forward. I know that became a thing a few years back, but you would expect them, because there might come a point where we're not getting that breakthrough and Jota's not scoring a couple of goals and Abada's not getting a purple patch of form, and it's down to your centre forward and you need to score the goal. So I think there's a few tests before I'm completely convinced, but I didn't write him off. It's not like I called him Kaskamakis or something, right? Because I've seen Tony Cascarino. I think I've seen every game he played. And he was rotten, and you could see it from the very early performances that he was rotten. And I didn't write Yakimakis completely off. However, I'm not convinced yet, and hopefully he can come back into the side. Will he start against Wraith Rovers? I'll ask you first, Brian. Let's have a wee chat about the Wraith Rovers game coming up this weekend. There's a few that I've got question marks alongside. I'm thinking Rogic, Yakimakis, Julien, even Scales. Are any of these guys going to start for you?
I think so, yeah. I think you probably see Welsh coming back in as well, just to try it up. But listen, like you were talking about the Yakimakis, it's the same with my take on Maeda. I just don't think he had a great game last night, but I think he's going to be a brilliant player for us. You're allowed to criticise players if they're not having a great game. Hatate wasn't great either, and I was doing cartwheels signing his name last week. So, it's nobody's writing anybody off. And I think that on the cup game against Wraith, I can agree with GP. I don't see any reason why you won't play a strong side. He's determined to win trophies. I think you see a bit of rotation, but the good thing is, if we're rotating a full 11 now, it's still going to be strong. And that's the advantageous position we're in versus the start of the season. So I think it'll be a strong side. I think Maeda might start, actually, just to try and give him another chance to get through 90 minutes under his belt. But you really don't know, and I suppose that's part of the excitement.
Yeah, what about yourself, JP? I mean, I've thrown these players into the mix. Julien was part of the squad last night. He didn't make the bench. I was reading this morning that Dembele was also part of the squad last night. That's brilliant as well to see him coming back in. But the Scales thing, I'm just looking at if Cameron Carter-Vickers or Starfelt get injured or suspended at some point, the go-to at the moment is Welsh. So you're kind of thinking, well, let's get some game time in Scales' legs in his preferred centre-half position. Let's get Julien some game time so that if we need them between now and the end of the season, they can be called upon and you're going to be a wee bit more confident that they're going to have that sharpness. That's why I've thrown Julien and Scales into the mix. Rogic, how do you fit him in? Do you automatically take Hatate out because he was not his usual standard last night? And Yakimakis, it's the flip of a coin for me between him and Maeda. But the one thing's for sure, in the Alloa game probably reaffirmed this, you've got to play a strong side. I mean, we've seen it. Remember we drew against Arbroath at home. We had to go away and we beat them 1-0, Adam Matthews. And we know all the famous games we have been beaten.
Dunfermline extra time under Rodgers.
Mm-hmm.
At Alloa at home, when they had Jack Ross, that was a tough game. There's no way we can take it for granted that we're just going to, steamroll them. I hope we do, obviously. But I mean, I'm not going into that game putting bets on for 5, 6, 7-0 or anything like that, because it doesn't work like that. I would imagine Beaton might come in. He'll obviously have an eye on Bodo Glimt, which is amazingly next Thursday. Mm-hmm. I can't believe that's come round as quickly as it has. But also looked into the away trip. I don't know if I mentioned this before on air, but my word, that is not an easy place to get to. I think we've got 500 tickets or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, fair play to anybody making that journey, because it is not a, you know, a 2-hour direct flight, you know, and then, you know, sunshine. It's pretty much the Arctic Circle, and it must probably take, whatever airport you get to, you're going to then need a further hell of a journey after that to actually get there. Because if you look it up on a map, it's just this little dot in the middle of nowhere, and there's nothing round about it. So, but yeah, I think you'll have an eye on Sunday for Thursday. So maybe McGregor might get a rest and bring Beaton in. Forrest may start instead of Abada, because he obviously didn't start last night. But I don't think it's going to be wholesale changes. Maybe might give Bain a game because it's home. I don't know. That's just total speculation. It's just, you know how these things usually go in these cup games. Players come in to get a 90 minutes under their belt, and you know we'll take it from there. Just hopefully we're in the hat the next day. Raith Rovers is we've beaten them plenty of times since '94, but that will always haunt me. The League Cup final. It was not a pleasant night.
That was a sore one, absolutely. Yeah, and never watched the game back. Never will. Now, JP, it's always a pleasure. We haven't actually hit the klaxon for the music chat today, so we need to return to that next week. Brian, it's been a pleasure.
Carpenters.
Oh, we did, and Declan took us to Oasis, yes.
Proper old school Celtic part of that Top of the World song. I've not heard that since the 90s, and it's not as if we've not had the opportunity to sing Top of the League looking down on the Rangers in the last decade, but for whatever reason it's just, I don't know, it's just never been sang. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere at Pittodrie, it's just was the anthem of last night, and it's great to hear because I remember that fondly. Also remember fondly singing "We'll Meet Again" via Lynn at any team that was getting relegated. That was always a really enjoyable chant. Remember singing it against Hibs at Celtic Park when they were going down under Alec McLeish, if I remember rightly.
Aye, I remember the Pars sang "Happy Birthday, Dear Celtic," and we sang back, "You'll be back, you'll be back, you'll be back," and then it all went a wee bit sour with Chris Sutton a few years later. By the way, that ticket to your right as you look on the screen isn't a Raith Rovers ticket, it's Blackburn Rovers. We played them in a friendly. It was at Hampden. I remember that well. We beat 1-1. It was 1-1. Andy Walker scored. So thank you, Brian, for switching your Wednesday to a Thursday. Thank you, JP Mason, for joining us as usual on a Thursday. And thanks everybody for getting involved. If you haven't done so already, get yourself on the YouTube channel. We've got massive content coming your way. So excited about a lot of the things that we're working on, and we'll be putting it on the YouTube channel, fully produced, all free of charge. So thank you all for joining us on A Celtic State of Mind.